wanted to stay a while, see how it's done.
Well, a lot of those moves were born on stage.
I'm just cool.
Here we go. We have funk royalty in the building.
Morris Day never let go of the grudges he held against these 8 singers. And it wasn't only about the music. Some tried copying his style, others disrespected the funk he helped pioneer, and a few just flat out rubbed him the wrong way. From the backstage battles with Prince to the quiet resentment over lost credit and creative control, this is how it all unfolded. He locked horns with legends like Rick James. "I think it was a pressure thing," he once said. "It wasn't really hate. It was more about feeling threatened." And when Bobby Brown raised doubts about newcomers like Al B. Sure and Sisqó, Morris fought even harder to defend the legacy he built. Here's what really went down, and why those grudges still haunt the story. First up on Morris's list was Terrence Trent D'Arby. Terrence Trent D'Arby stormed onto the scene in the late 80s, and he didn't just sing, he bragged, declaring himself the future of funk and soul. And Morris Day, he wasn't having it. Morris, already a master of confidence, saw the act as pure arrogance. "This cat walking around like he invented confidence, please. I've been cocky since birth," Morris scoffed. To him, D'Arby was just a flashy copycat, all eyeliner, dramatics, and ego, but missing the authentic funk roots. Morris couldn't stand that the industry was fawning over someone he considered style over substance. While D'Arby was crowning himself the next big thing, Morris was already the established icon, rocking sharp suits, slick moves, and real funk swagger. In his mind, there was room for only one true funster, and it definitely wasn't a newcomer who cared more about eyeliner than grooves. For Morris, this wasn't just about music. It was about pride, reputation, and who truly embodied the spirit of funk. And he wasn't about to let anyone, especially a cocky upstart like D'Arby, snatch that crown. Sure, D'Arby had chart toppers like Sign Your Name, but Morris was holding the fort, oozing confidence, charisma, and a funk pedigree that couldn't be duplicated. As any real fan would know, Morris Day and Prince had one of the most famous love-hate relationships in music. They were friends, frenemies, and rivals all at the same time. Prince gave Morris his shot at stardom, but he also wanted to keep the reins. Morris, on the other hand, was determined to carve his own path. That clash of visions created constant tension, and their rivalry only intensified as the years went by. Prince and Morris first crossed paths when they were still young, both growing up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They shared a passion for music and the dream of making it big. As Prince's star rose, he wanted to form a group he could fully control, from the sound to the players themselves. That's how he set Morris up as frontman of The Time in 1981. The Time became a powerhouse funk band with Morris at the mic, but behind the curtain, Prince pulled the strings. He wrote the songs, played most of the instruments in the studio, and left Morris to bring them alive with his flair and attitude. Tracks like Cool and Get It Up became instant hits, cementing The Time's reputation as a fan favorite. Prince was clever. He wanted to explore new sounds without having to compromise or change his own public image. Well, the setup worked. Both men gained from it. But Morris eventually grew restless. He wanted more creative control over the band's sound, not just to follow Prince's orders. To him, The Time wasn't supposed to be just another extension of Prince's empire. It was supposed to be his. That tension only escalated when Purple Rain hit theaters in 1984. In the movie, Morris literally played Prince's rival, and the on-screen hostility mirrored their real relationship. Behind the scenes, the arguments were constant, sometimes boiling over to the point where they nearly came to blows. Both men were obsessed with being on top, and Morris refused to be seen as Prince's sidekick. He wanted to stand as a star on his own. That competition showed most clearly on stage. The Time often opened for Prince's concerts, and their high-energy sets regularly stole the spotlight. On some nights, fans even thought Morris and The Time outshined Prince's band completely. That lit a fire under Prince, driving him to push harder so no one could upstage him. What was supposed to be entertainment turned into an all-out battle for dominance. But the pressure finally broke Morris. By 1984, he walked away from The Time, tired of living in Prince's shadow and wanting his freedom. He launched a solo career that earned him moderate success, but nothing close to the magic he'd had with the band. Meanwhile, Prince only rose higher, cementing his reign over music and pop culture. Even after they parted ways, the rivalry and unresolved tension never really went away. When the time got together and decided to make a record, Terry and Jimmy were all in. But Prince shut it down immediately. No, you can't use the name. The next artist Morris Day never forgave needs no introduction. Rick James and Prince had been feuding for years, and naturally, Morris Day found himself right in the middle. When Rick mocked the time as nothing more than Prince's little funk clones, Morris fired back the only way he knew how, with sharper suits, tighter grooves, and his trademark attitude. Behind closed doors, Morris didn't mince words either. Man, this dude ain't even that funky. The rivalry even spilled over into image wars. Both Rick and Morris rocked bold, unforgettable hairstyles, and those hair battles became part of the spectacle. Rick James was already a powerhouse in the industry, known for his raw, gritty brand of funk. He had earned his spot as a legend, but things changed once Prince arrived on the scene. In one infamous moment, James offered cocaine to members of Prince's band, thinking it would bond them together, but the band refused, wanting nothing to do with drugs or that lifestyle. The rejection stung Rick. He felt they were looking down on him, as if Prince's crew thought they were somehow above him. That slight cut deep. James became convinced that Prince saw him as outdated, a relic of an older funk era. He believed Prince didn't give him the respect he deserved as a pioneer, and the resentment only grew. After years of fighting for his place in music, watching a younger star rise and act like the torch had already been passed was hard to swallow. "I think it was a pressure thing," Rick once admitted. "Not really hate, more like feeling threatened." Then came the fight over funk itself. Rick James accused Prince of stealing the very style he helped pioneer. Funk was Rick's kingdom, his signature sound, and he felt Prince had borrowed it, reshaped it, and put his own name on it without giving credit. To Rick, it was nothing short of betrayal. Prince was building on the foundation James had laid, but instead of honoring it, he twisted it into something new. No matter how experimental Prince got, Rick insisted the blueprint still belonged to him. Their relationship cracked even further when Prince, who once opened for Rick on tour, suddenly exploded into superstardom. Almost overnight, Prince's music dominated the airwaves, while Rick felt his own spotlight dim. He believed Prince had used his stage as a stepping stone, only to leave him behind once he broke through. As Prince became a global icon, Rick was left watching from the sidelines, feeling the sting of being overshadowed. People excused Prince's eccentricities, calling him a genius entertainer who earned his hall pass. Fans didn't care if he was unconventional. His sheer talent bought him respect, especially among men who might have otherwise dismissed his flamboyance. Rick just couldn't understand it. To him, Prince's music was strange, too experimental, and far removed from the soulful, straightforward funk he loved. Instead of appreciating Prince's innovations, Rick dismissed them outright, calling his work confusing, watered down, and unworthy of the funk crown. The real dagger came when Prince started winning Grammys. Rick had spent years carving out his legacy, only to watch Prince walk away with the accolades he believed should have been his. Every award Prince claimed added another layer of salt to the wound, deepening a rivalry that would never truly heal. For Rick, every award Prince won was a painful reminder that the younger artist had not only surpassed him, but was now being celebrated in ways he never was. Morris Day wasn't impressed with the polished pretty boys either, even though DeBarge had it all. The looks, the voice, the women. Smooth, polished, and armed with a falsetto that melted hearts. Morris Day could care less. Sure, Elle wasn't just another pretty face. He had the same charm, the same vocal appeal, and the mirror to prove it. But Morris wasn't exactly sold on Elle's polished pretty boy image. "Man, he sings like he's scared to sweat," Morris once joked, mocking Elle's flawless, almost too clean delivery. To Morris, that smooth style lacked the grit, sweat, and fire that made funk real. But truthfully, the biggest issue wasn't even the music, it was the women. Elle's effortless charm had ladies swarming to him, and Morris didn't like seeing someone else soaking up the attention he lived for. In Morris's world, he was the king of the club scene. Not some fresh-faced heartthrob who didn't even have to break a sweat to steal the spotlight. Elle was cutting into the adoration Morris thrived on, and that was personal. The rivalry between them went deeper than style or talent. It was about ego, about who could command the most admiration, and in Morris's case, the most love. Elle's falsetto may have melted hearts, but Morris's sharp suits, raw confidence, and undeniable funk energy ruled the room. No matter how high L could sing, he would never match the grit and swagger that Morris Day had spent years perfecting. The next artist on Morris' hit list was something to cry about. Keith Sweat rose to fame with his signature begging ballads. But to Morris, the whole act was wrong. "Man, stop crying on the track. You're supposed to seduce them, not sob for them," he once jabbed, annoyed by Keith's tearful delivery. To Morris, seduction was all about smooth confidence, never desperation. And in his eyes, Keith had turned desperation into a genre. Morris couldn't stand it. Sure, Keith scored big with Make It Last Forever, and fans swooned over his pleading tone. But Morris wasn't about to sing from a place of heartbreak. His philosophy was simple: exude confidence, make it look effortless, and let the women come to you. Where Keith's tracks sounded like the soundtrack to a breakup, Morris's hits were the soundtrack to walking in, owning the room, and leaving with exactly what you wanted. The contrast was crystal clear. Morris was smooth, cocky allure, while Keith was begging for affection. And for Morris Day, that was just way too cheesy. Morris Day never shied away from being the flashiest man in the room. With sharp suits, slick moves, and an undeniable presence, he was the embodiment of funk and swagger. But when Al B. Sure hit the scene with his curly hair, smooth looks, and soft-spoken falsetto, Morris couldn't help but roll his eyes. "That ain't a falsetto, that's a nap whisper," he cracked, making it clear he wasn't impressed. Al B. Sure leaned into the quiet, sultry side of R&B, and while that had its audience, Morris wasn't having it. It wasn't personal. He didn't hate Al himself, but stylistically, Morris was out. "Soft funk ain't real funk," he declared, dismissing Al's approach as watered down compared to his own bold, in-your-face style. Sure, Al was smooth, but Morris thrived on edge and attitude. To him, Al's delicate falsetto lacked the punch and grit that funk demanded. Morris saw Al as a knockoff version of the swagger he had already perfected. The issue wasn't Al B. Sure the person, it was what he represented. To Morris, that softer sound felt like a departure from the real funk that made R&B pop. While Al serenaded the ladies with gentle tones, Morris made sure the beat hit hard and the energy matched the intensity. Morris wasn't just a singer, he was a presence. He could walk into any room and own it with pure confidence and funk. And in his eyes, Al B. Sure lacked the grit and fire to play in that league. Morris wasn't only the king of funk, he was the definition of it. And Al B. Sure, no matter how smooth, was just a watered-down version of that legacy. Next, perhaps an unlikely target, but as you will see, there is a clear case to make. With his platinum silver hair and over-the-top antics, Sisqó reminded Morris of himself, but only in the most exaggerated, gimmicky way. "Silver hair? I did that in '84, bruh. You just turned it into a circus," Morris jabbed, throwing shade at the younger star's flashy look. Morris was no stranger to style. He lived for it. But where his own image was iconic, Sisqó's flamboyant approach felt like parody. The silver hair, the outlandish stage moves, to Morris, it all looked like a cartoon version of the bold confidence he had mastered years earlier. Morris believed style should be a statement. Sisqó, he thought, had turned it into a spectacle. "You just turned it into a circus," Morris repeated, making it clear he saw Sisqó as more about flash than groove. To Morris, that persona, the theatrics, the gimmicks, lacked the genuine funk and swagger that made true legends. His cool, calculated confidence had weight. Sisqó's antics? Just noise. And then came the Thong song. That track set the culture back a decade, Morris scoffed. Sure, it was catchy, but in his eyes, it was shallow, gimmicky, and more about shock value than artistry. To Morris, music was supposed to have depth, groove, and staying power. Sisqó's novelty hit, combined with his wild persona, did more harm than good for R&B's reputation. Where Morris built songs that lasted, Sisqó was chasing quick attention. And for Morris, that wasn't real music. It was spectacle, not soul. When it came to the bad boy image, few could come close to Morris Day. But the next artist was determined to make a run for the title. When Bobby Brown stepped out solo, he came swinging with the title of R&B's bad boy. But Morris wasn't impressed. "Another kid with a perm trying to outbad me," he scoffed. While Morris respected Bobby's hustle and his climb to fame, he wasn't about to let him steal the crown. To Morris, Bobby was simply chasing the image that the time had already mastered: the slick suits, the smooth steps, and the magnetic sex appeal. Morris was the original bad boy of funk, and he never let people forget it. Morris once quipped, "I moonwalked before he mooncrawled," taking a jab straight at Bobby's swagger. The comparisons between Bobby's flashy style and Morris's seasoned funk were inevitable, but in Morris's eyes there was no contest. But for Morris, Bobby just wasn't measuring up. Sure, Bobby had the moves and the suits, but he didn't carry the same edge, the originality, or the attitude that Morris brought to the stage. For Morris, it wasn't only about the look, it was about who truly owned the bad boy image. And he wasn't about to let some rising star snatch his spotlight by copying his style. Bobby could dance, Bobby could perform, but Morris had already defined cool, cocky, and unforgettable swagger in R&B. The competition was real. And while Bobby had the radio hits, Morris Day made sure he carried the kind of charisma no one could duplicate. Nobody can do it like me. The last one here is a total curveball because even post-mortem Morris Day couldn't escape what was coming. Morris Day was furious when Prince's estate told him he could no longer perform under the name Morris Day and the Time. After fronting the band for over 40 years, he felt the decision was not only unfair, but a direct insult to his legacy. Prince himself had never had a problem with Morris using the name. In fact, he had invited him to perform under it many times. But after Prince's death, the estate stepped in, suddenly laying down new rules. They insisted Morris drop the name, a move that threatened his career and his income. Morris took to social media, venting his frustration. He reminded fans that he had dedicated 4 decades to the band, poured his heart and soul into the music, and now was being stripped of the very name he helped make iconic. The estate responded, acting surprised by his outrage. They claimed discussions had been friendly, but behind the scenes, a letter from the estate's lawyers painted a much harsher picture. According to a 1982 contract, Prince's company owned the rights to the name The Time, and Morris had signed off on it back then. Prince had flexed that ownership before, once blocking Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam from recording under the Time's name when they wanted to cut a record. Still, the estate offered Morris a special agreement, allowing him to continue using the name. But negotiations fell apart as Prince's business affairs shifted hands, from Comerica Bank to Prince's family, and eventually to Primary Wave Music. Some insiders, including Primary Wave and attorney L. Londell McMillan, backed Morris, arguing that his history with the band should give him the right to use the name. But the fight over the Time wasn't just about paperwork. It exposed the messy, complicated relationship Morris had always shared with Prince, a mix of tension, rivalry, and occasional reconciliation. In the end, the dispute became yet another reminder that the drama between them never truly died. Morris Day had never forgiven certain singers, and the battle over the Time was just one more chapter in a lifetime of clashes and grudges.